Hello and welcome to the Collective Basketball Agreements Podcast. I'm your host, Joe Manganiello. Today we're talking Dallas Wings, a franchise in the WNBA that is attempting to take flight. 2024, they were more ground-bound, right? 9-31 record, missed the playoffs, fifth in the WNBA's Western Conference. Their offensive rating was 104.2. Sixth in the W, but they were dead last, 114 defensive rating. Whoa. Dead last, negative 9.8 net rating. Whoa. And, you know, I think as we talk about this team, well, let me actually get the financial fundamentals out of the way. They have 5 guaranteed contracts, including 1 fourth-year option that they picked up for Nalissa Smith. 8 unguaranteed contracts. So currently they don't have any roster spots open, but they do have that flexibility on the roster. $378,000 in total cap space. They have the number 1 pick in the 2025 draft, as well as number 12, number 14, number 27, and number 31. So it wasn't a great season for the Dallas Wings, and there were consequences as a result. You know, on the one hand, everyone in the WNBA is anticipating a lot of change in 2026 when there's a new collective bargaining agreement. On the other hand, I think that motivated a lot of players to speak up, take agency, and try to force the hand of the team that they're on to say, hey, I don't want to wait until 2026 for change. Find me a new team right now. And for the Dallas Wings, go figure, after being the worst team in the league, they had 2 of their best players, Satou Sabally and Natasha Howard, both ask out. They said, hey, I have played my last game in Dallas. We can work together, and players more so than teams can play this card. I'm going to go to the press. I'm going to make public comments. It will be a known thing that I am unhappy, and I will make this uncomfortable. Now, I don't want to accuse Satou or Natasha of bad faith or anything, because I actually think from my perspective, from the public's perspective, I actually think that things were handled professionally on all accounts. You know, it is a bad thing for a league where you have teams competing and a union of players that agree to a collectively bargained agreement on standards and what terms of contracts can and can't be. It's not good when one player attempts to derail that entire process and bend the parties at hand to their will. You know, the NBA in recent years have, I think, had some really ugly moments where players, I mean, even this year, you know, seeing what happened in Miami with Jimmy Butler, for example. I don't think that was good for the NBA to have one of its best players actively, you know, sticking a thorn in the paw of his own team, barely showing up. And every time he got in front of a microphone, throwing his own team under the bus. Now, to his credit, he got the result that he was hoping for to get to a team like Golden State. And to Miami's credit, they ended up getting a trade that I think that they can live with. In this case, you know, Dallas, if we want to start with Satou Sabally, Dallas ultimately, as a team with the number 1 overall pick, they know the direction they're going, assuming that Paige Bueckers does come out of school, this year and leave UConn and is ready for the W. They know that that's the future of their franchise, Paige and Arike Ogunbowale. And we'll talk a little bit later about some other moves that they've made. But ultimately, I think that Satou and Dallas were able to work out something that really made sense for both sides. We're also going to talk about Natasha Howard briefly, as that trade was really, really simple. They just sort of did right by a veteran player and found a better situation for her. And we talked about Natasha quite a bit in the Indiana episode. If you want to hear more about my feelings, my thoughts on her fit in Indiana. Again, just to rattle off some stats, Dallas was 12th in defensive rating, 11th in three-point rate and assist rate. So even though you have two players of size who can shoot the basketball, who should help you be quite a modern offense, right? If you have Satou Sabally and Natasha Howard as your 4-5, or even as your 3-4, you should be able to put out a very compelling offensive team, and they were bad on both ends, but specifically on defense. Worst opponent rim field goal percentage in not just in the league, but in recent history. Opponents were scoring 61% at the rim. The vast majority of shots at the rim going in. And, Dallas was last in assisted threes, 11th in assisted turnover ratio. Arike, for an all-star player, does receive quite a bit of criticism for the way that she plays. I do think, alternatively, that when Paige takes over the point guard role, with that needs to be a little bit more balance. It needs to be a more egalitarian offense. Can't just be the Arike show every single possession. And I have all the faith that these two women are going to find a combination that works. Ultimately, I think the Satou trade was a win for the entire WNBA. I think that, as we talked about with Phoenix, they're able to combine two of the best players in the world, Alyssa Thomas and Satou Sabally, and build an instant title contender around that combination. Should be really fun to watch that work out. Connecticut, they're rebuilding. They have some tools and some young players that they can use for their rebuild. We saw Indiana get involved, acquiring Sophie Cunningham, and rounding out a roster that is ready to jump into title contention themselves. And that's interesting too. It's a 4-team deal. 2 teams that are priming up for a title run, 2 teams that are ready to rebuild. And ultimately, Dallas is able to add Ty Harris and Dijonai Carrington. Carrington leaves Connecticut. This is a sign and trade. She gets a $200,000 salary, so a big payday for her. Now one of the top 25 paid players in the WNBA, an elite defensive player, versatility, energy, the ability to guard multiple positions. This is a very high demand skill set. And, she's going to take a lot of pressure off Paige Bueckers from day one. Paige doesn't have to guard the other team's point guard just because she's a point guard. I think about how Klay Thompson was able to provide a lot of relief for Steph Curry as Golden State was establishing its championship team. Klay would guard the other team's best perimeter player. I think that's Carrington's opportunity to stick in Dallas and be a high-value player. And I also really like Ty Harris, age 26, South Carolina alum, number 7 pick in 2020. Made 42% of her threes last year in Connecticut, or rather over the first 2 years of her deal in Connecticut. Only a $100,000 salary this year. I think that Dallas is going to be able to play Paige, Arike, and Carrington all together. I wouldn't be shocked if that's the starting lineup, starting backcourt. You add in Alyssa Smith, who is a former number 2 overall pick, didn't quite work out in Indiana. And the stats would tell you that defensively, it's a real question mark on if she should be a starting big in the W, even as a power forward. I think we're going to see Alyssa get the first crack at the starting 4 spot next to Teaira McCowan at the 5. Of course, Teaira, 6'7", 240, a ton of size, a very respected player in the W. I'm a big fan. Now, notably, Dallas also signed a defensive-minded forward, Myisha Hines-Allen, away from Minnesota. They made an offer that she couldn't refuse, $203,000 for an age 28 forward. Dallas now has 4 players making over $200,000 this year. When you count in Arike, she got the Supermax a season ago. And so Dallas is in a cool spot where I think that they're a lot, for a worse team in the W, I actually think that they have a lot more talent. I think what happened last year, Satou wasn't perfectly healthy. She's missed a lot of time during her tenure in Dallas, to be sure. And defensively, when you don't have continuity, when your best players are in and out of the lineup, of course you're going to suffer. I think weirdly, Natasha Howard is a very good defensive player, and the pieces didn't fit together last year. I think she's going to go to Indiana and be great. I think Satou and Alyssa Thomas together in Phoenix, I think that defense is going to be great. I think all 3 of these teams implicated by these moves, Indiana, Dallas, and Phoenix, I think all of them might be better on defense. Now, it's incremental. I mean, shoot, Dallas can only really go up from a 114 defensive rating. And they are going to have rookies in the lineup, especially if they use the 12 and 14 pick on roster players right away. But Carrington is going to be a big help. I think NaLyssa Smith has an opportunity and should have a lot of motivation to use her physical tools to the best of her ability and reestablish herself on that end of the floor. Myisha Hines-Allen is a great defensive player. McCowan, with her size, would love to see her flirt with a double-double this year. You know, if she could average 9 to 10 rebounds a game, that would be a big help. And I'm not just saying this because I'm a Villanova Law alum, but I am really, really excited for Maddy Siegrist this year. I think year 3 for Siegrist could be a step up. She won the Athletes Unlimited Pro Championship this offseason, which I'm not super duper familiar with this, but that she ended up having the most individual points in that offseason league, in a league of 40 people. So Siegrist is going to probably come off the bench. They're going to, try to set her up. She's really good moving off the ball, catching, dribble, pull up. Dribble, pump fake, pivot, jump, right? Like, yeah, I think Siegrist is someone who ideally is scoring 9, 10, 11 points per game on a really, really efficient clip, maybe even adding some 3-point volume as she continues to establish herself in the league. So right there, Paige, Arike, Carrington, NaLyssa, Teaira, Myisha, Maddy. Plus, we'll see what they do with the 12 and the 14 pick. I mean, they could have an 8, 9, maybe even 10-man rotation that really makes sense, that really fits, and they're going to be better. They're just going to be a better team. Losing Natasha Howard as a free agent, and I want to clarify, she didn't get traded, but she signed as a free agent. I think that's fine. I think it was a great deal for Indiana. It made sense to let Howard walk. So I really like how this team and this offseason has panned out for them. For their sake, I hope Paige goes pro, and excited to see how that all comes together. I would pick Dallas to finish outside of the playoffs. But if you told me that they grabbed the 8 seed, especially if there were a couple teams that underachieved or had bad injury luck and they were able to play themselves into the 8 spot, that would be a fantastic outcome for that franchise. And hey, look, just, sort of making a nod to the NBA for a second. I am pulling for Dallas basketball fans for the foreseeable future. They could use something to root for. But with that, I'm going to wrap up this episode. Thank you for your support, and tune into the Collective Basketball Agreements podcast as we continue to break down WNBA free agency. Thanks for listening.